The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's Manufacturing Power Hour. Understanding Project Files is the topic, and my name is Don Warner, and I'll be presenting you to today. Just some things about M2. M2 Technologies is a consulting firm focused on productivity, improving manufacturing efficiency processes, and reducing manufacturing costs. We have generative design, best-in-class manufacturing, and asset management processes. Our team of industry experts can help you become more sustainable, more profitable, and more prepared to meet the demands of urbanization in a rapidly changing world. What we do, we have several different areas that we can help: BIM for manufacturing, asset management, process automation, and data management. We are also an industry leader partner. We're an Autodesk Gold partner, a Panzura partner, an Eagle Point Pinnacle partner, and a Bluebeam partner, definitely offering multiple solutions to your environment. Some of our services are including, but not limited to, CAD management, design automation, software development, product management lifecycle, some data management, CAM, and many other features. Just some introductory. My name is Don Warner. I'm an applications engineer. I have over 30 years experience. Most of my experience comes between Autodesk product support and channel partner experience. I also have about 7 years of design manufacturing experience. Today's agenda is basically just explaining to you what Inventor project file does and how it can help you better maintain or streamline your data on how it is called within the Inventor program. The agenda will include explaining the project file structure, using the Use Style library setting, incorporating appearance and material files, also mapping support paths, library and subfolder usage, and at the last, we'll talk about discussing the project option settings. So about project files, it is in fact apologize. The project file is in fact a single project. It is an extension of an IPT. It's an IPJ file. The IPJ, it's a pointer. This is not a modeling file. This file absolutely will dictate where your inventor will grab supporting files as your top level design loads. You can have a number of project files to manage your work. You don't necessarily just have one. The design files are typically include your parts, your assemblies, standard components that are unique to your company. Also has the ability to pull in library files, such as fasteners and fittings, electrical components. This is stuff that you could actually make in your designs as a library file. They also can use something called Content Center, which are two different database file locations. When Inventor is first installed, there are 3 project files: the default project file, the sample project file, and a tutorial project file. In order for Inventor to load, it has to have a project file already active. So they have developed a default project file which will automatically load. In some cases, people will install Inventor not realizing what a project file is and just immediately start working. Within the project file wizard setup, it allows you to go ahead and set all of the defining paths. You can, at any time, you can add and delete locations from the project file. In order to do this, you actively have to close down all files open in Inventor before you can edit your project file. If you try to edit your project file within open drawing or any open documentation, there will not be options to save, or they will be grayed out. This example just shows the Inventor dialog box, the project dialog box. You can access this through the File tab, the Manage, and it will open up to a set of subfolders or sub-options, one of them being projects. Once you open the project, you will see a pretty straightforward dialog box, 2 sections. The top section allows you to create a new project file, allows you to browse out and pick an existing project file. The bottom section simply shows you the information to the project file that is checked off at the top. The one that's a check mark is the one that's active. The dialog box on the right is just an expansion of the lower section where all of the supporting information can be configured. The project file types, when you first load Inventor, you will notice the top dialog box will give you an option for new single user project file or a vault project file. In the options of Inventor, there is a way you can turn on the enable of legacy project file types. This is located in the General tab under the username information. Now, what happens when we turn these on? It will then give you 5 options for a project file. The semi-isolated master, semi-isolated workspace, and shared project file. These are, in fact, legacy project files. I do not recommend turning these on. This is more of a slide to explain how Inventor has evolved. These project files, these 3 project files that are listed in red, they were actually introduced into Inventor quite some time ago, more than 20 years. What happened is when Inventor first came out, in essence, this was their initial attempt to get into a pseudo vault environment. At the time, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when Inventor was first being developed, Vault was not around. So these project files were basically being developed for a work group, or in essence, multi-user environment. There were some problems with these file types causing corruption in the data of the parts or the assemblies. What had happened is these are saving across the network, and sometimes the information was being dropped, which led to segmented database errors, so on and so forth. So Autodesk had come out with Vault and had replaced Vault for these 3 project files. And again, this is something of more of a legacy information. If anyone has any project files that are still listed as these types, you want to be real concerned about possible data loss. If you are using those still, you would really want to consider looking at the Vault options. So going down the initial settings when you start a new project file, when you go ahead and you set the initial name up, this particular one is a single user project file. The first setting down underneath that is the include file option. This is something, again, that was always been there since the inception of Inventor. Basically, it allows you to piggyback and put another project file um, in conjunction with your one that you've just started. Again, it gets a little confusing, but really what this comes down to is the ability to add more paths outside of what you're currently defining in your single user project file. Again, this is something that is not widely used, but it is something that allows you to basically increase the level of search paths for your files. And as I go down through the rest of the presentation, um, again, it really is still there that I believe from the semi-isolated and shared legacy project files. So again, it's not anything that you need to set. If there is some type of expansion that you're looking at for search project file search types, you can definitely uh, get better results if you institute Vault. The next setting down is the use styles library. This gets to be a little bit confusing. What this is, it allows you to basically push changes back into your design data folder. I'm kind of jumping ahead. The design data information is covered later in this presentation, but the design data is for your part file, basically it's lighting and text. The lighting information could change. You might have different angles in the lights. They can then be pushed from the drawing into the design data folder. The design data is nothing more than a bunch of XML files that hold these settings for the different areas that you're in. And again, for a part file, you can only change the lighting in the text because you have 3D annotations that you can now put on the part files. But for the DWGs and the IDWs, there's a lot more information that the design data stores. For example, you have balloon, your call-out balloon information, your dimensioning information, whether it's 2, 4 places with tolerances, all that stuff is captured and saved in XML files. Same with layers, parts list, so on and so forth. What the read-only means is basically you are having the user only work with what's in the design data folder. In other words, they can't make any changes. If they had something in, say, a dimension, they have a drawing that's open and they needed a 4-place dimension style that was not currently there, they can go ahead and make that change to the drawing only. But what happens is that information needs to be pushed back to the design data folder. The XML needs to be written back to the master location per se. If you have the read only setting, you are basically telling the users any design data change that they make is only going to be made for that specific document. It won't be a global setting. In order to make those global settings, you really have to come in here and set the use style library to read write. And you can see in the screenshot next you have the save option. The save option becomes available to you. What this allows you to do is take that information, again, say a 4-place decimal, allows you to create that in the document, and before you close the document, you can actually come into the Styles Manager and hit Save. This icon will then pop up another dialog box that says, do you want to save these changes back to the design data folder? You'll have the option for yes and no. But again, that will take the document 4-place, and then it will write it into the dimension XML wherever the design data folder is, and it updates that for a global setting. Next down is your callouts for your appearance and material libraries. Again, it gets a little bit confusing. It's not, these are separated out of the styles. At one point in older release inventors, these actually were incorporated into the design data folder, but since then they have been basically taken out, and they have an extension of a ADSK file. These libraries are nothing more than databases. The appearance library is colors, any type of a surface that you want to apply to a part. You can have as many of these swatches defined, and they can be pulled in and mapped or presented onto surfaces of your part files, assembly files, so on and so forth. Again, this is appearance. Consider it you're painting a surface, or maybe you're putting some texture down. Maybe it's a wood grain, so on and so forth. The material itself is the actual material file that's going to be assigned to the volume of the part, physical material. What you'll notice there in the dialog box, the screenshot that I have in the upper left, you'll have some that says Autodesk Appearance Library, and then there's some for the Inventor Material Library. Inventor, what it does is it allows you to have separate control in the Inventor environment. Or if you are working in multiple environments, say you're working in Revit and Inventor at the same time, you can actually switch to the Autodesk Material Library, and those will be shared across platforms. I'd like to talk about the project workspace next. This is basically a pretty simple setting. When you first define your project file, it is looking for a folder. You can create a folder. It could be an existing folder. It can be out on the network. If you choose to have it on the network, you are taking into risk that you are saving across the network. What we do is we do recommend you having it local. That way you're saving to local drive, and then at the end of the day, through maybe a copy and paste, you can move information onto your server. In some cases, we've seen information packets being dropped. There's no rhyme or reason around that. It could be network traffic or a network hiccup. But if you happen to lose packets of data, that file is more likely going to be corrupted and unopenable. Just be aware of that. If you do want to take the network approach, use the universal naming convention as the path to that and not a mapped drive. What has happened in the past, project files have had mapped drives. The IT professionals come in and they remove the drive mappings and map them somewhere else. This will cause performance issues with Inventor as far as loading the files, and it could possibly result in file resolution errors. Paths you'll need to correct. And this area here is work group search paths. Basically, these were in essence working with the legacy project files. You would need this in a shared or a semi-isolated projects, but it is not needed for single user projects. Again, not to spend too much time on this, avoid using the work groups altogether where possible. Again, it's been in use for the legacy project files, and if you don't have those on, simply no need to use this. You can ignore it. If you do have those turned on, the legacy project files, you just need one work group. But again, if you have that environment, I strongly recommend you looking at Vault, as it is a much safer environment. Next up is the library search paths. What the library search path is, not to be confused with the content center libraries. Library folder would be something of parts that you manufacture. You aren't going to change these. These are maybe some, for example, spacers or anything along that lines where you create the part, you're pretty sure that it's not going to need to be modified. You can define a folder. It can be out on the network. it can be local, but again, this would be where you would put your commonly created files that you design, and you can save them up onto that library folder. If Inventor calls in a library part, you will not have the option to edit this part. This part will come into your assembly, and if you go ahead and you try to right-click on it and say edit, you'll get a warning saying this is a library file and cannot be edited. So if that's the case, and you need at time to time you need to get in there and maybe modify a couple of your library files, maybe you need to remove some material, add a chamfer, fill it, whatever the case may be. This is a good example of where I would have the CAD manager or a dedicated person who is you can control one or two people to make these changes. You could have on their system a project file, a single user project file, that the workspace would be this library folder. So you're basically creating a project file, and I would call the name of that project file, for example, edit library components. And that way you know when you turn this project file on, you're going to be going into the library paths and making changes to the files that are in that folder. Again, you close out of that path, you go ahead and reset to your current design project file, and that's how you can kind of get around modifying parts that are in those library paths. And down the bottom of the text, for those of you who deal in iParts, it is going to require a couple of folders. The iPart factory file, this is the part that's going to have all your versioning. That's going to need to be in a proxy folder, or somewhere where it's outside of the library paths. When you go ahead and you generate members, the members are the versions of the files. Those are in fact can be in the library paths. So if you do get into some iParts and you want to look at manipulating the folders, you can definitely reach out to us and we can guide you a little bit better on that perspective. And getting to the next one, which is the frequently used subfolders, this really only comes into play if you had, for example, say you created your workspace out on the network, and in that workspace you have, maybe tens or even hundreds of folders. Inventor will start to systematically go down the folders to find the files. So if your files are in a subfolder that is, buried, say 50 folders deep, or however the case may be, again, Inventor starts at the top and work your way down. What you can do here is you can actually come in and path to the frequently used subfolders. Maybe these are the folders that contain just your parts, your drawings, your assemblies. But again, if you put paths in here, Inventor will search the workspace first, the default folder workspace, and then it will hit these frequently used subfolders next. And if it still needs to find files, it will start to systematically go down each one by one. So again, if your folder structure is really large, it is probably worth your while to move all of the main part folders and assembly folders into this frequently used subfolder. And next up would be just talking briefly about the folder options. As you can see down the bottom, I've expanded the plus sign in the folder options. It gives you 4 areas really where you can define your templates, your design data. This is what I was talking about earlier. Then there's something called presets, which was introduced in 2019. I'll talk about that in a brief second. And then there's your content center files. So your template files, basically, your default location is what is stored in the application options. You can actually, per the project file, you can set different template folders. If you don't set a template folder, again, it's going to use the default, which means every project file you create will have the same templates. If you have a customer, or maybe you have multiple customers that you have different types of drawings you need to produce for them, then it might be worth your while to come in here and set different folders. Again, this is where when you activate the folder, excuse me, when you activate the project file type, the template folder will then set per this setting. The design data functions the same way. There will be a C colon backslash, and it'll give you a path to the design data folder. Again, these are XML files. If you had multiple customers that wanted things differently on their drawings, then there's probably a good chance you may need to create two separate design data folders. And depending on the use style library that I spoke to earlier, you can then go ahead and push these custom looks or changes that the customer wants to their specific templates. So it is a nice feature to have. Again, that's setting up the design data. The presets, that's when you look at anything that has a properties dialog box. For example, if you were to put a hole into your part, whether it's a tapped hole or a countersunk hole, maybe it's a clearance hole. But if you use certain criteria over and over again, in other words, you go into the whole dialog box and you've got to click it about 7 or 8 times to set what you want, the preset will allow you, and this is in the upper part of the dialog box, it's a little plus sign. When you click on that, it will actually save that preset information into an XML file. And that XML file will be pushed to where your presets are. So I don't really foresee anyone that might need to have multiple preset locations. It would mean you would do certain types of holes for one customer and maybe certain types of holes for another customer. That's really where I could see possibly 2 different preset folders existing. But again, it's something you might want to play around with. It's anything that comes up in the properties dialog box of the feature. In other words, if you go into tube and pipe, there's a properties palette there. If you have all these tube and pipe styles, you can save those. Hole settings, you can save those. Again, there's a lot of preset information and it's being generated there. The content center files, the last path down the bottom, this is the path where the actual data is going to get created. If you're in the content center libraries, you want to drop in a bolt or nut, a washer, whatever the case may be. Once that file is placed in the assembly, the data needs to be saved. The 3D modeling data needs to be saved as in other words, a part file. So it is actually going to save that into that content center file path that you see down the bottom. And again, all these defaults have controls in the application options files tab. And those where you can set. The last area of the project file really kind of really only has really one, 2 settings here that are all important to you. It's really the old versions to keep on save and the unique file names. The name is where you can actually change the name of the project file display name. Same with a shortcut, you can edit that, and the owner and the ID is really just for CAD admin information. So go back to the top, the old versions to keep on save, the default is -1. Now what -1 allows you to do is every time you click a save on your part file, it's going to create a backup. So if you hit the save 5 times, you're going to get 5 backups, or it's going to be older versions as the Inventor saves these backups into the old versions folder that is a subfolder under your current workspace. If you were to set the value of 0, that would mean you would not be creating a backup. You want no backups for any of them. You click save 5 times, you've overwritten the part 5 times. No way to get back to the previous versions. And you can set all the way up to 10. So the values are -1 for all, 0 for none, and you can go 1 through 10. So if you had 10 set and you saved 10 times, the 11th save would overwrite your oldest save. And the last one here is the unique file names. You want this to be set to yes to make your life easier. If you set this to no, it allows you to use multiple files with the same name. And I think that's pretty dangerous. Inventor, even though it's a smart program, it's going to know which file is going to go with which assembly. There's really no reason why you don't want this to yes, because you want to be able to be overwritten or warned that you have another file of that name in there. If you have this turned to no and you're working in a single user environment and you are creating non-unique file names, you may run into a problem when you try to vault the data. So again, it's a good thing that you set this to yes and have this turned on. One other area I want to talk about briefly as we're running the time here, in the project dialog box, just above the done button, you'll notice in the screenshot in the upper right, there is a configure content center button. And what this allows you to do is when you're in your project file, whether it's a vault or single user, you can click on the content center libraries here, and it will actually display the dialog box down in the lower left. The path to the content center files is displayed, and depending on what they are, it gets a little confusing, but you can install what we call desktop content, which is local to the machine, or you can install server content. So the server content, the files are a little different. Extension, it is MDF, LDF extensions. For local content, it's IDCL. These are the extensions of the files. And what you see here is Inventor allows for multiple projects to have as much information loaded whenever it feels you dictate. When you get into creating a project file, it's going to by default have all these content center libraries loading, because it doesn't know that you don't need ISO or you don't need the GIS. It's going to load them all. This will dictate performance on your content center. When you first fire up the content center and you want to go ahead and drop in a bolt or a nut, you may wait a few seconds because it's taking time to load. So what you can do is you can come into your project file, you can edit it, or at the time of creation, you come into this dialog box and you uncheck the ones you don't want to load. And this will increase the performance dramatically. The icons on the bottom, just above the above the OK and the cancel. These really only come into play when you have problems with the content libraries. More than likely, these are custom libraries. You can create your own library. As a matter of fact, Inventor does create one called My Library. So if you were to make some content creation on your Inventor and you want to turn this in or push this into a library, so you can reuse that content, again, you can push this into your own custom library, making your own custom parts. And as you go from Inventor from one release to another, you will have to migrate these, and these are what these tools are at the bottom. When you first open a newer version of Inventor, it will, depending on the paths, it may find older libraries and warn you that they might need to be migrated. And there's a migration tools and a wizard tool down at the bottom. If you run into any issues with libraries such as this, by all means, you can reach out to support@m2.com, and we will definitely try to assist you with what's going on. So with that, I appreciate your time and reviewing, spending time with me reviewing what project files do and how you can kind of manage them to the best of your ability. I'll take a look to see if there are any questions at this time. I don't see any questions at this time, but I'd like to at least thank you for watching and taking time out of your day to hopefully learn something new about Inventor project files. With that, there's some contact information. And thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.